Man, the stories today are good. All right, let's get into the last story of the day. So this one came in anonymously, a lighting designer and event designer with 30 years of experience. Lots of 30 years of experience in there. Working in corporate trade shows, special events, and fashion. This is one area I have never done a fashion show, one of the few events I've never done. So the story is client for a fashion show changed their floor covering last minute, overnight, over the weekend for the show on Monday. We aren't talking carpet floors like epoxy to steel plate. Holy cow, that's quite the change. This had to be sourced, cut, and installed in less than a day, including refocus and revision of lighting design and bringing in additional lighting. The main producer assumed that they knew what the client wanted, but didn't ask for clarification. They obviously learned that they needed to be more clear in understanding what the client wanted. Wow. A lot of things to unpack here.
All right. So it sounds like this particular situation has to do with those last minute major changes. This is no longer a tiny little change that has happened. Yep. Okay. I have actually done quite a few fashion shows. When I first started in AV Productions, my playground was LA, and we were working for a fashion designer, Cristiano Digier. And this is a designer that put on Ed Hardy, and the Crystal line. I used to be into fashion way more back in those days than I am now, obviously. But what's interesting is that this was the fashion designer that would put on fashion shows out in the open at the Grove in LA. And Kim Kardashian, this was one of her first shows that she attended as a runaway model.
Before she was like Kim Kardashian.
Before she was Kim,
humbled.
the Kim. Yes. So I was working those shows. I'm pretty sure I probably ran into her. I mean, like all the other models on that runaway without ever having a clue who this was going to be. So it's funny and interesting. And there's quite a few celebrities that would always attend those fashion shows. Some of those bashes that he would do, which always included some kind of a fashion show, even at his mansion in Santa Monica, were crazy. And we were the preferred AV production company to go and install lighting. Lighting is huge in fashion, and obviously sound reinforcement, but also plexiglass over a pool, see-through, stages. That he would have this super long, what do you call those lap pools? I think it's a lap pool, right?
Okay.
That super long, wide lap pool. And we would install a clear plexiglass stage all over it so that you can see there's water underneath, and then lead it from above, behind, everything. And then he would have those runaway shows even at his mansion. So to your point, like changing a stage, I think that is the least favorite thing to do when you work productions. That and pipe and drape. Because it's highly physical. And I've never done staging. I've definitely done pipe and drape, but staging it's really brute force. Like it's heavy and it's uncomfortable. It's what you would hire subcontractors to do so you don't have to deal with. So I can imagine, if you're on a tight run of show agenda, turnaround, and you get this last minute change of order that now you should have a stage or a flooring that is this type of flooring just to source that. Like imagine the headache to try to source it. Then imagine the headache to have to find the labor to set it up, to install it. It sounds like it had to be custom set up and design and cut to make sure that it fits whatever this setup look like. And then the additional labor on top of that is you've already done your lighting, your cues, your main points, your focuses, everything. I don't know exactly if this was pre-LED lighting and moving heads, because this is a long time to be doing lighting in the event industry for 30 years. Or was it when we were still doing park ends and literally you had to get on a ladder to like aim the Lico light and the park end, adjust your barn doors to make sure that you're getting those cuts perfectly. So there's a lot to be said about what this entailed, but it sounds to me like it was a lot of extra labor that was maybe unnecessary if this little detail was known a little earlier?
I mean, I think it's a little bit on the planner as well, because, and this is me as a control freak, and I know I'm not your average planner, but I would have been asking for renderings and photos and verifying what my stage was. Like, that's the most critical piece next to probably lighting and sound to a fashion show. So I would have been all over making sure the stage was exactly what we wanted, instead of showing up on a Thursday or Friday for install for my Monday show and then being like, oh no, this is all wrong. So a little bit on the planner for not triple checking, because mistakes happen, like stuff goes wrong. But then also the producer or whoever was installing that stage also should have taken it on themselves to double check and verify and make sure. The biggest takeaway is how one small decision or one small change has this huge domino effect of other things that now need adjusted because of it. To your point,
Absolutely.
let's say this was 15 years ago and it wasn't robot lights and cameras, and someone physically had to get on a ladder and adjust every single one of those
Yeah.
lights. I mean, that stuff takes hours after they'd already spent hours setting it up in the first place. So I think there's a lot to learn here. There's a lot of miss on both sides. The planner, not necessarily the anonymous submitter, but like the fashion show house that was putting this on, and the stage producers, they could have had better communication.
It sounds to me like, and in this type of situation, many times you actually don't even have a planner. You just have a producer, right? That talks
Mhm.
directly to the client. So that producer could be very technical, but it doesn't mean they're very planner savvy, if that makes
Yep.
sense. And I think a lot of misses usually happen on events, especially live events, if this dynamic happens and the person that is supposed to be taking care not just of the technical details, but also all the other logistics and planning and forethought and strategy, all of that, if they don't have it in them to be a good planner. I actually I came up with this a name called technical event planning. When I got into this and I realized there has to be a lot of planning that has to be done prior to us showing up on site to set up this event. You can't just tell us, hey, we have an event, we just need some audio, video, lighting, and figure it out, and we're good to go. That is the recipe for struggling, last minute changes, extra labor
Mhm.
needed, headaches, and things that are not necessary if you could only go through the planning process. And I think now that we've grown into this industry, especially in the last 15, 20 years that I've been around, I've seen especially AV production companies doing better, having
Yeah.
account managers, having technical event planners. Literally, my designation was TEP, technical event planner, because I was that interface talking to the client before my tech team was going to go and execute the event. So in this situation, sounds like we probably did not have a planner. We had a producer that could have been very much tech savvy, but not necessarily detail oriented savvy or so many
Yep.
other requirements needed savvy for this to go well.
For
And
sure.
one thing that I'm seeing that I feel like it's also been a bit of a miss is assumption.
Mhm.
You probably assume that you did this event for your client several years in a row the same way, same old. How could they possibly change anything? And then here you are, the day before the event, the client wakes up deciding that they want a different floor, which is a completely change from what your assumptions were in the first place. So relying
Yep.
on assumptions to me is recipe number one for a disaster like this to happen, because you just assume that what you know about the event or about the client or about the details for this particular time and place and date are the same as they were for this other event that you did, maybe with the same client, maybe the same event, but without taking in consideration what other things might have been part of that mix. So assumption to me is like the main culprit here
Yeah.
for why this has gone quite a bit astray. Because I mean, who's paying for those additional hours of labor now?
Yeah. Or there's sourcing and cutting and the readjusting the lights. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, the age old saying about assuming is it makes an ass out of you and me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say there is one silver lining to this story that I do want to call out that this
Yes.
submitter came through. The fact that you were able to source from an epoxy floor
Mm,
to a steel plate floor in like 36 hours and get it custom retrofitted to fit in that space, installed, and redid all your lighting. I mean, hats off, because to do that over a weekend for a Monday show is pretty impressive. And I think it goes to, we've talked about this over and over and over again about the importance of having deep Rolodex in relationships, because I can only imagine the favors that were asked and pulled to be able to make this happen for this client. So bravo for bootstrapping it and getting it done, because it doesn't always go that way.
absolutely. Good point pointing that out. I just hope that there was enough communication from the producer to the client to go back and say, hey, highlight the potential expense that this will impact for the event, because this is what we had to do, this is who we brought in, and this is how much it's going to cost extra, and signing off on those changes. Because what happens many times is you do want to roll with the punches and you do want to make your client happy, but then when it's time to invoice for all of those additional add-ons and additional hours and additional and everything and anything, you're going to get a fight back because you never made them aware of those things whenever this was happening. Now, I'm not saying that you need to bother them for every single, I don't know, tape or easel that you add on or something irrelevant.
An extra
like that.
power strip or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, don't do that. Take care of it. But if you're going to have to change things at this magnitude, you better have them sign off on it for your own protection, because otherwise you're going to have to pay out of your pocket all this additional labor hours and whatever sourcing that you had to do in order to save this event. And you want to come out as the hero, not as the villain.
Right. I mean, this was tens of thousands of dollars in fixes between the stage changing and over the weekend and like it was a lot. So I think having clear understanding with the client of like owning up and being like, I know we messed up. It's partially on us. We shouldn't have assumed. But just so you know, these are the consequences and the hoops that we're going to have to jump through if this is a mission critical piece to the show going off well. And then at that point, the planner has to decide, is the epoxy floor okay? And we roll with it and we make some smaller, cheaper adjustments to accommodate, or do we stick to our guns and say, no, I have to have the steel plate and you guys are going to have to work with me on the cost of this. But having that conversation up front, I think protects everybody.
And it has to be because, for example, in a different situation, we were working with a client that wanted to put on an event at some, I think it was a winery, somewhere in the middle of nowhere where we knew power is an issue. So there was some power, there's some infrastructure, but not enough to carry a whole AV production type of setup for this, I don't know, 650 in-person gala that they were trying to do in this beautiful tent that obviously requires a lot of lighting to lit up and create a nice experience for your attendees, especially at night. So against our recommendations and our advice to have backup power, which would have been a generator to run all of this, the client decided, no, it's not worth the money. We don't want to pay for the extra power. We're just going to plug into this Winehouse read and we'll be fine. The grid should be fine, should carry us. Yeah, sure, it should, unless you start throwing a bunch of watts at it in lighting and projection and anything else that requires a lot of power, sound system, all the gear that's involved. And somewhere midway through the event, the breaker pops. The breaker pops. Oh my gosh. So obviously there's a bit of emergency going on. We got to go find the breaker, turn on the power, salvage what we can from what is the most important thing that we can turn on, knowing that this breaker cannot support this load. And obviously as an AV production planner, you do the math. You know, hey, I can only load this circuit with so much. But if this is outside of your control and somebody in the kitchen decides to pop something into this same circuit that you don't even know, obviously your math it doesn't matter anymore because you just overloaded the circuit. So bye-bye. So in this situation, the client now is fighting back that it was our fault that we were not prepared for the situation. And how come we didn't have a backup? Like, we didn't talk about this at all. We didn't advise for us to have a backup. We did not mention how important it is to have a generator. None of that happened. So communication wise, I feel like you have to have it on paper, like written, track it, so you
Yeah.
can go back to it. It's actually on May 16 at 4:25. I have mentioned how important this was and how the success of your event depends on us having a backup. And yes, that would have come with an extra charge, but now we wouldn't have to have this conversation in the first place. So, what do you do as an AV production company or agency? One, you have two choices. One, you might have to refund some of the money for the perceived, damage caused by the situation where for a few 5-10 minutes you are scrambling to turn power back on, or you stick to your guns, but you could be losing that client. So navigating that type of scenario is very, very important. And it's very delicate as well, because you have to decide, am I fighting knowing that I was right? Or am I going in here humbled, knowing that yes, we'll take responsibility, but at the same time, I'm not going to give this show for free, because we worked our asses off to pull it off and we saved the day, however, against our best advice and recommendations.
Yeah, and I think a message to planners too is don't be unreasonable. You didn't get the generator to the event. You declined it to save your budget to order the extra flowers or whatever.
Or did the butterflies.
Right, or the butterfly launch. You know what? Maybe that gift you're giving to all of the people doesn't need to be $100. It could be 50 so that you can afford the backup. Sometimes it's kind of like building a house. If I focus all on the decor and the finishes, but I don't take care of proper plumbing and foundation, my house might be beautiful, but one windstorm comes over and bye bye house. All those finishes are for nothing. And so I think about it the same way when it comes to event planning and design as well. Like sometimes planners don't need to be so unreasonable. Like if you don't want the risk or you don't want to have to worry about a total blackout on your event for 5 or 10 minutes, which, as we know, is a lifetime when you're scrambling,
Yes.
then you've got to scale back on other things to afford the budget to have those backups.
And trust your providers or your vendors or your experts that you brought in, knowing that they're there to do a good job. Nobody wants to be put in a situation where they have to be scrambling, like in our example here with the staging and in the example that I gave with the power. Nobody likes that. Nobody is
Yeah.
waking up in the morning thinking, okay, what
How am I gonna screw
challenges
this
can I
event today?
create for myself?
How do I make today harder for everyone,
Exactly.
including myself? Like, no one thinks. I think everyone, and I've always approached events in this way, always putting our best foot forward. I hired my vendors for a specific reason. I need to trust them to do their jobs. It's in their best interest to do my job well, too. Like, they want to do a good job for me, they want to do a good job for our attendees. So let them do their jobs. If they're making the recommendation, there's probably a reason for it.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, there's definitely been examples where you would have some type of a vendor that is there and taking absolutely no responsibility for their doings or not doings and just throwing their hand in the air and be like, not my problem. It's your problem. Now, that is not a good partner to
Yeah,
have.
no,
But
not
in
good.
most cases, that's not going to be the case. In most cases, you're going to deal with decent humans that want the best for your event because their reputation is at stake as
Right.
well. And they're going to do the best they can to solve whatever challenges are happening. But the least we, I guess, the most we can facilitate that some of those are not going to happen, I think the better it is for everyone involved. I think that kind of sort of wraps our conversation today for those 3 stories we've had. Any last thoughts on all of those? I mean, 3 different situations, lots to talk about. We obviously did our best to unwrap as much as possible, not knowing all the full details. So there's has been some assumptions
Yeah,
here as well. But
sure.
any other thoughts, Megan, that you want to add to our 3 topics mentioned today?
No, I mean, just 3 amazing stories today. Thank you guys for submitting. Some certainly harder conversations than others when we start getting into, harassment type of conversations.
Yeah.
But I think trusting your partners, having advocates, being clear with your communication. I mean, we could boil all of this down into having respectful, clear, honest conversations. All three of these stories would have very different outcomes had clearer, honest conversations happened.
100%. Well, this definitely wraps our episode for today. Thank you so much for all of you that have evented about it with us. I want to extend our heartfelt thanks for everyone that has submitted those incredible stories. I know that, Megan, you feel the same, and we definitely welcome more of them because we want to keep talking about it.
We have our own stories we can vent about, but I love venting about other people's stories.
I mean, there's nothing like sharing your stories and being put on the spot versus, venting about somebody else's stories. But again, we want to make sure that you are comfortable when you share those stories. And if you just want to share tidbits of it, we'll make the rest. I mean, we'll probably come up with our own version of what has probably happened. And you're going to be protected from that point of view at least. You do have the option to obviously share it anonymously. We want to make sure that everything that you share, it doesn't put you in a precarious position where then you have to figure out how you're going to navigate the aftermath. So thank you for doing that. And I have some exciting news. Megan, I'm kind of excited about our next 2 episodes. You know why?
We're going live because we're going to do it live. We're going to roll the dice. We want you to join us. And maybe, just maybe, we could have a special guest maybe tell a story live.
We'll definitely make it happen. I'll be the behind-the-scenes guru getting you on stage here. I think I know how to press a button or two to make that happen. But we really, really want to hear more of your stories, whether those are some of those war stories that we heard today or some of the hero stories. I haven't heard many hero stories. I think next time, Megan, I think we should start with the hero story.
Let's do it.
I love it. All right. And with that, make sure you follow the links in the episode notes to submit your stories so we can feature them in our upcoming live episodes. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and Spotify, as well as follow our LinkedIn page. The 2 live links to join us are currently on our YouTube page and on LinkedIn. So if you haven't yet followed us or found us, make sure you go to Events Demystified Podcast on YouTube or LinkedIn, because we want to make sure that you attended and you share your thoughts, your stories, your examples of what a good story could be like. I'm all for that as well. I appreciate all the support that you've given us all this 5 years of being on air. Thank you for helping us bring all these valuable conversations and discussions to you. And with that, we look forward to hearing from you and your amazing stories next time. Until then, stay inspired. Keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in event planning and event productions. Any last thoughts, Megan?
Can't wait to see you at the live episode next week.
Awesome. Well, see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Events Demystified podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to review it, rate it, and share it with other event professionals that could benefit from it. Connect with us on social at Events Demystified Podcast. We would love to hear from you and what you're up to. If you'd like to learn more about pre-fan event services and find out if we're a good fit in supporting your event, can we help your event be successful with a 20-minute free consultation? Link in the episode's notes. Thanks for tuning in.
Over the past 5 years, we've poured our hearts into the Events Demystified podcast, exploring the intersections of audiovisual technology, AI innovations, and the crucial role of mental and physical wellness in event production. We've also shined a light on the talented women working behind the scenes in AV. As we plan to deepen our impact and reach more listeners like you, we need your help to achieve this. Listen, tune in to any Events Demystified episode on Spotify. Follow, hit the follow button on Spotify to keep up with our latest episodes and updates. Review, rate, give us a 5-star rating on Spotify. Share, pass your favorite episode along to 2 friends who love crafting unforgettable events. Win. By following these steps, you'll be entered to win a $50 Amex gift card. Join us, share your voice, and let's demystify event experiences together. Your host, Anka Platon Trifan.